from Russia, a large transport arrives at an airfield in Chongqing, China. Aboard is a visitor from America, Vice President Henry Wallace. Traveling as the personal representative of President Roosevelt, Wallace is welcomed by Generalissimo Chiang Kai-shek and other high Chinese officials. At Zhang's summer residence, over 150 guests attend an official banquet given by the Generalissimo and Madame Zhang in Wallace's honor. Zhang proposes a toast to President Roosevelt. In his response, Wallace said to the Chinese people, more than 20 million of whom have been killed in the war with Japan, there is reason to hope that China will be free in a year.
On the afternoon of the 8th of August 1945, the men of an army 1 million strong were about to be taken completely by surprise. These were the ground troops of the Kwantung, a Japanese army of occupation based in the Chinese province of Manchuria. The Kwantung Army was long established in the region. By the summer of 1945, the Japanese occupation of Manchuria had endured for 14 years. Officially, the province was the state of Manchukuo, an independent land led by the former Chinese emperor, Henry Puyi. But Puyi was nothing more than a puppet. It was the Japanese who held the real power in Manchuria. And by 1945, the local people must have wondered if they would ever see the last of the troops that occupied their land. As the men of the Kwantung Army went about their duties on the 8th of August 1945, they knew that their grip on Manchuria was under threat. Just 2 days earlier, an American atomic bomb had laid waste the Japanese city of Hiroshima. As news of the nuclear attack spread, many soldiers of the Kwantung must have wondered if they would face a similar fate.
Of many nations, American, British, Canadian, and those driven from their homes by Nazi persecution, have perfected the atomic bomb, most astounding development of scientific history. At the University of California, in absolute secrecy, Dr. Ernest O. Lawrence experimented with the cyclotron. Such work as his led to the splitting of the uranium atom, force of the atomic bomb.
I shall ask Congress to cooperate to the end that its production and use be controlled, and that its power be made an overwhelming influence toward world peace. We must constitute ourselves trustees of this new force, to prevent its misuse, and to turn it into the channels of service to mankind.
As events transpired, the second atomic bomb was deployed against the Japanese homeland at the city of Nagasaki. But the occupiers of Manchuria would not escape the full force of war. Just hours before the destruction of Nagasaki, the Kwantung Army was also attacked in what can now be seen as one of the most intriguing operations of the Second World War. At 0100 hours on the 9th of August 1945, the Soviet Union launched its Manchuria campaign.
General George C. Marshall, General H.H. Arnold, Chief of the Air Forces, and Fleet Admiral Ernest J. King attend the meeting. General A.I. Antonov, Red Army Chief of Staff, and Soviet officers meet with the Americans. On 8th August, 1 week after the conference ended, Russia declared war on Japan and sent her Siberian armies into Manchuria.
The Soviet attack on Manchuria may be one of the least well-known episodes of the Second World War, but the offensive provides us with a brilliant example of how to unleash an overwhelming invasion force with brilliant organization, planning, and execution. All through the summer of 1945, men and material was relocated from Europe to the Far East as part of the preparation. No fewer than 136,000 railway wagons were used, as victorious Soviet forces from the west journeyed up to 12,000 kilometers to take up positions in the east. By early August, 1.6 million men were ready to take part in the Manchuria attack, along with 5,500 tanks and no fewer than 28,000 guns, mortars and rocket launchers. In overall charge of this Far East Command, Marshal Alexander Vasylyevsky, former chief of the Soviet General Staff and mastermind of the Stalingrad offensive. Now, in August 1945, this gifted soldier found himself preparing for another huge engagement in a very different theatre. Vasylyevsky's objective can be easily understood. His task was to drive the occupying Japanese out of Manchuria. He knew that this would hasten the end of the war against Japan, and success would bring about a massive increase in the Soviet Union's regional influence after hostilities were over. To achieve his task, the Commander-in-Chief conceived a plan that was both simple and bold. A simultaneous attack from all sides, involving an enormous display of military muscle. By the 8th of August 1945, Marshal Vasylyevsky had successfully organized his forces into 3 vast army groups, or fronts. Beyond Manchuria's northwestern border, he positioned the Second Far Eastern Front, a combined army group comprising 337,000 men. Their objective, to strike southwest towards the cities of Harbin and Sitsihar. Simultaneously from the northwest, the men of the 36th Combined Arms Army would march forward in support of the same objective. But this 36th Army represented just one element of the wider Trans-Baikal Front, one of the 2 major army groups on which the success of the offensive would depend. Commanded by Marshal Rodion Malinovsky, another hero of Stalingrad, the Trans-Baikal Front could call on the efforts of 654,000 men once battle was joined at 0100 hours on the 9th of August. And this vast force had a clearly defined objective. The overall plan determined by the Far East Command was for the Trans-Baikal Front to form one half of a classic pincer movement. Its objective was to sweep over the inner Mongolian desert, over the Grand Hingyan Mountains, and down into the strategically vital central Manchurian plains. If the Trans-Baikal Front succeeded, it would be joined there by the men of the First Far Eastern Front, approaching from the opposite side. This second half of the pincer was another vast army group, a total of 587,000 troops, under the command of Marshal Kirill Meretskov. The resources at his disposal included Colonel General Krylov's 5th Combined Arms Army, a force that would be in action as soon as the offensive began. By the 8th of August 1945, Krylov and his troops finally knew when that moment would be. The final great campaign of the Second World War was now imminent. At 0100 hours on the 9th of August 1945, the men of the 5th Combined Arms Army moved across the border. On thousands of miles of front, all around Japanese-occupied territory, the